Yo, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to the show. Just got done finishing today's blog and just wanted to share a story with you guys. Today's blog is about like depression and low-fat diets. And you know what I see when I speak with new clients during our initial consultation is, I ask them, what do you eat? And they'll tell me it's low fat this, it's low fat the other, it's 1% milk, it's lean like chicken breast and whatnot, and some salad on the side. Everything's low fat. It's protein, it's carbohydrates, it's too much grain, it's too much food. And I'll say to them, so how long have you been depressed for? And they'll go, how did you know I have depression issues? Because it's like literally screaming at me off of that piece of paper. It's screaming at me, from what they've told me about their diets. There's not enough fat in the diet. On Monday we talked about the whole 99.99% of our genes were formed before the agricultural revolution, which was 10,000 years ago. And we talked about how dramatically and drastically our diets have changed and some of the repercussions of that. And one of the, a few of the repercussions are, cancers and heart disease and obesity, but very seldom do we ever take the time to think of the depression, anxiety, mental disorder, addiction issues that we have now. Let's look at the work of Weston Price. Let's look at the work of Stefanton. I can't say his first name, the guy who studied the Eskimos, but he said that the Eskimos were the happiest people on earth, and they had an 80% fat diet. They ate animals. Let's look at Dr. Weston Price. He said that the people whom he lived with and studied, these primitive people, they consume 10 times more fat-soluble vitamins than we do. In order to consume fat-soluble vitamins, you must consume fats. You must consume, for the most part, animals. He also said that they consumed 4 times more minerals than we do currently. And so we have to think about it from the extent or from the context of we have brains, and we need our brains to function properly. There are neurotransmitters and things in there. There's connections going on in there that are going to give us, or provide us with the mood that we have, if that's a proper way of saying it, but you guys get what I'm saying. Now, in order for those things to work properly, you have to have the bricks that build them. You have to have the constituents that are going to build them to allow them to function normally. But what a lot of people tend to forget is that 60% of our brains are made out of fat, that there's a lot of cholesterol in our brains. Okay, when we tend to want to get our cholesterol down to these little minuscule levels, people who have low cholesterol tend to have mood issues. They tend to be more violent people. They tend to have more suicidal behavior. Cholesterol is a very good thing. It's like we're trying to, stamp out heart disease while making everybody absolutely miserable. And the way that we're doing this doesn't stamp out heart disease, because that obviously is not working. We need saturated fat in our diets. We need cholesterol. We need vitamin A. We need vitamin D. You guys are familiar. We've done shows with Julia Ross. We've talked about the amino acids and proteins and whatnot, and the neurotransmitters that they make. Like, for example, serotonin, or I'm sorry, tryptophan is an amino acid. It's a protein, or part of a protein, that makes serotonin. And serotonin makes you nice and happy. Well, in order for that conversion to happen, you need a sufficient amount of vitamin D. Where does vitamin D come from? Well, yes, it comes from the sunlight, but most people don't really get outside very often anymore. And then, depends on which area of the world you're living in right now, whether or not there's enough sun to give you enough vitamin D. But vitamin D comes from animals. Okay, we need sufficient vitamin A. Vitamin A comes from animals. We need sufficient zinc in order to keep our zinc and copper ratio balanced, but zinc isn't really in that high supply in plants. And there's so many different things, but there's not enough protein in our diets. We eat the wrong proteins that don't have sufficient tryptophan or tyrosine and some of the other proteins or amino acids that build up our neurotransmitters. And so, what we really have to do is kind of just think about this. Think about the way that people used to eat and how happy they were and how healthy they were, and model them. I'll tell you quickly my experience with this. You guys know I used to do the whole low-fat diet with the chicken breast and the oatmeal and the basic bodybuilder personal trainer diet, and I was miserable. And I spent a year of my life on Paxil. And that's one of the reasons why I do this whole underground wellness thing, because I literally laid in bed, you know, for many days just reading books, trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with me. And I bumped into Weston Price and Paul Chek and Bill Walcott and Dr. McCullough and some of these other folks, and I learned, hey, saturated fat really isn't that bad for me. Because I used to be that guy who used to look at the labels on processed food that I thought was good for me, and if there was any saturated fat in it, I wouldn't buy it. If it had skin on it, I wouldn't need it. If there was a yolk in it, I wouldn't need it. You know what? I was absolutely miserable, and I had to resort to an antidepressant. I had to be on Paxil for a whole year. But when I found out, you know, the truth about food and how it influences the mood, I started eating more saturated fat. You know, I got over that fear of saturated fat. And I think a lot of people out there need to get over theirs. And I started to feel a lot better. And I was able to go off of my Paxil. And, you know, I had a little bump on the road because I went vegan for a little while, or vegetarian, when I found out how poorly they treat animals. But, you know, I went right back into my thing, and I was ordering my Paxil again. But I figured, hey, there's got to be a better way than this. And so found out that there was like US Wellness Meats. There's places where you can get actual real grass-fed, you know, real meat. And I started to eat that, and it made me feel a whole lot better. And now here we are, free of depression, you know, free of anxiety. Of course, I have my, you know, my bad days just like everybody else does, but I do not have to resort to antidepressants. And most of us don't have to resort to antidepressants. We just aren't simply eating the foods that build our brain and give us the mood that we should have. And so that's pretty much it for today. Yesterday's show with Pam Colleen absolutely rocked. That was one of my favorite shows. I was a little bit off like the last couple of weeks in terms of my interview skills, but yesterday was bomb. Pick up her book. Where's her book? Addiction, The Hidden Epidemic by Pam Colleen. That's her right there. She was the bomb on the show. So check that out. We will see you on Monday. Hope you guys liked the recipe from yesterday. Out of here. Peace.